Having arrived in New York for the UN General Assembly, President Yoon kickstarted an array of bilateral talks with world leaders, asking for support for Busan's bid to host the World Expo 2030. A prisoner swap deal has been completed between the U.S. and Iran following the release of Iranian funds frozen in South Korea under U.S. sanctions. Seoul says it hopes for better relations with Tehran. The nation's auto exports last month were the highest for any August, led by strong demand for eco-friendly cars. It's September 19, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Our top story this evening, a flurry of diplomacy. Having arrived in New York for the UN General Assembly, President Yoon Suk-yeol kickstarted an array of bilateral talks with world leaders, 40 or so, asking for Busan's bid to host the World Expo 2030. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports from New York.
President Yoon Suk-yeol is utilizing the UN General Assembly visit to New York to meet with as many leaders on the sidelines as possible to request support for Busan's bid to host the World Expo 2030. At 10 a.m. on Monday, he landed at John F. Kennedy Airport and went straight to meet his Sri Lankan counterpart for talks, which was followed by summits with San Marino, Burundi, the Czech Republic, Denmark, and Montenegro, among others. By just 7 p.m., he had met with 8 leaders. The meetings will have a repeated message requesting support at the BIE. But understanding the broader bilateral context is vital for Yoon during these meetings in order to use the opportunity to broaden South Korea's multilateral diplomacy. For instance, the meeting with San Marino marked the first talks between its leadership and a South Korean president. They discussed enhancing tourism cooperation. Similarly, in the meeting with the Czech Republic, they focused on energy and infrastructure, particularly hydrogen energy and trains, areas where the Czech Republic is seeking collaboration with South Korea. Yoon also discussed climate change with countries including Denmark, a long-standing ally since the establishment of the Green Growth Alliance in 2011. Additionally, several countries acknowledged South Korea's significant role in ensuring stability in the Asia-Pacific region through security cooperation. Fall goes to plan for his stay until Friday. He's set to meet with around 40 leaders. That's not to say sideline summits are the only items on the president's schedule. He'll also meet with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and will attend a reception hosted by US President Joe Biden. Wednesday is a big day, as Yoon will be delivering his speech at the UN General Assembly. He also returns to NYU's Digital Vision Forum on Thursday, before wrapping things up here on Friday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, New York.
Against this backdrop, a former South Korean ambassador to the UN says the Yoon administration's intentions to expand its role in addressing global concerns is a welcome initiative. Oh Soo-young covers these remarks.
South Korea has a crucial role to play in a world that faces continuous threats and challenges that leave the most vulnerable people in society even further behind. That's according to South Korea's former ambassador to the United Nations, Oh Jun, who also served as president of the UN Economic and Social Council. Ahead of President Yoon Suk-yeol's address to the General Assembly, all raised the urgency of advancing key 2030 agendas, including the Sustainable Development Goals to end extreme poverty and the Paris Climate Agreement on reducing carbon emissions. He says time is running out.
The implementation of the SDGs has been negatively affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, as you know. For example, the global population below the poverty line, which had been going down since the Millennium Development Goals, started to grow again for the first time in 20 years.
Or underscored the humanitarian crisis in Myanmar as an example, having visited the Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh last month, which is the world's largest with about 1 million refugees, half of whom are children under 18.
The number of refugees and displaced people in the world keeps growing, with more diverse factors causing their hardship, such as wars, climate crises, and natural disasters.
Or endorses Ho's growing commitment to official development assistance, which will see a 44% increase in next year's budget. He said the beneficiary-turned-donor country can now increase the quality as well as the quantity of its contributions. This includes President Yoon's push to set global standards on digital access, rights, usage and development.
Standardization will also help to enable many developing countries in the world to gain access to the global market and to position themselves on an equal footing with the developed economies. This, I hope, will in turn contribute to bridging the digital divide globally, which is an important target of the United Nations and other international bodies.
Or chairs Save the Children Korea, which has provided tablet PCs and online education to increase access to quality learning, as well as aid for children in conflict-ridden Myanmar and Ukraine. Despite the growing number of common challenges, Or says global cooperation has also suffered setbacks due to reasons that include rising nationalism.
Countries like South Korea should be more active in promoting global cooperation, because as a middle power, we benefit more from a stable and rule-based world based on global governance provided by multilateral institutions. For example, when the war in Ukraine is over, I think there will be a serious debate on the big loopholes we have in the current peacekeeping mechanism. I hope South Korea can play a leading role in such a debate, not least because we will be a member of the Security Council for the next 2 years.
President Yoon on Wednesday will push for Ukraine's peace and reconstruction and outline his plan to address global gaps in development, climate and digital transformation in his vision to make Seoul a more responsible actor in the international community. 오수영, Arirang News, New York.
The U.S. says it'll coordinate with the international community for any violations of UN Security Council resolutions by Pyongyang and Moscow. And President Biden is expected to bring up the issue of expanding the council to rein in the veto powers of Russia and China as he addresses the UN chamber. Shin Se-byuk tells us more.
The U.S. has said it will discuss ways to hold North Korea and Russia accountable with the international community if the two sanctioned regimes violate UN Security Council resolutions. The statement came from White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby during a press briefing on Monday. He mentioned that Washington will continue to closely monitor the situation, including any potential violations of UNSC resolutions by Pyongyang and Moscow. Such remarks were made in light of the recent meeting between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin last week. Details of any agreement reached during the meeting have yet to be disclosed. However, the international community expected the two to strike a deal in which Pyongyang would supply weapons to Moscow and, in return, receive satellite technology. Meanwhile, the U.S. plans to push for UNSC reform during the upcoming UN General Assembly. The Telegraph, reporting on Sunday, cited John Kirby in reporting that Biden will seek to expand the UNSC to offset Russia and China by adding 5 or 6 new permanent members. The move, according to Kirby, aims to create a more quote-unquote inclusive and comprehensive council. Currently, there are 5 permanent members: China, Russia, the U.S., the U.K., and France. Possible new members include India, Brazil, Germany, Japan, and South Africa. However, an amendment to the UN Charter is needed to add more permanent members, and this could be vetoed by either Beijing or Moscow, as each of the permanent members holds veto power. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
High-level officials from South Korea, China, and Japan are set to meet in Seoul next week to hold talks on trilateral cooperation. Seoul's foreign ministry on Tuesday said the Deputy Foreign Minister Chung Byung-won will meet with his Chinese and Japanese counterparts on the 26th. The three sides will discuss various matters related to three-way cooperation as well as future direction. A foreign ministry official hinted at the possibility of a trilateral summit by the end of the year, adding that a foreign ministerial meeting would come before a potential summit. The last three-way summit was held in 2019. A prisoner swap deal, month in the making, has been completed between the U.S. and Iran following the release of Iranian funds frozen in South Korea under U.S. sanctions. Seoul hopes better relations with Tehran, while Washington thanks Seoul for this hostage release. Choi Min-jung reports.
The United States and Iran have completed a rare prisoner swap deal after billions of U.S. dollars of Iranian funds frozen in South Korea were released. In a statement on Monday, U.S. President Joe Biden said 5 Americans are finally coming home. They had been in Iran for nearly a decade, detained on a number of allegations, including espionage. Separately, Iran state-run media reported that 5 Iranians who had been charged with crimes in the U.S. are now free. Citing sources, Reuters said the swap happened after both sides confirmed that around $6 billion of frozen Iranian assets were transferred from South Korea to Qatar, with Qatar being the mediator of the U.S.-Iran talks. Seoul's foreign ministry on Tuesday confirmed that the funds had been successfully transferred to Qatar. The money had been locked in South Korea due to sanctions imposed by the U.S. following its withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. It has become one of the main reasons behind South Korea and Iran's thorny relations, as Tehran has long been demanding that South Korea release the funds. That being said, South Korea expressed hopes to mend ties with Iran.
The government hopes that relations between South Korea and Iran will further develop following the transfer of the frozen funds.
However, there seems to be rising tensions as to how the funds will be used. Iran's foreign ministry claimed complete access to them, saying they would be used according to its needs. U.S. officials have stressed that the assets can be used only for humanitarian purposes, and that all transactions will be monitored by the U.S. Treasury Department. South Korea's foreign ministry has also underlined that the funds transferred to Qatar will be used for humanitarian uses, such as purchasing medicine. Meanwhile, Biden thanked South Korea and other countries involved for helping the detained Americans return home. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also thanked South Korea for its close coordination and partnership. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Korea's auto exports last month were the highest for any August, led by strong demand for eco-friendly cars. Park Go-nu reports.
The value of auto exports last month reached an all-time high for any month of August. According to a report by the Industry Ministry on Tuesday, South Korea's automobile exports in August came to a total of $5.3 billion, a 29% jump year-on-year. South Korea has been seeing increases in the double digits every month since July 2022. Thanks to healthy outbound shipments, South Korea produced more than 300,000 vehicles in August for the first time in a decade, despite the fact that auto companies usually shut down factories during the month for about a week. An industry ministry official explained that the vehicle production supply chain only began returning to normal after the negative effect of COVID-19. Strong exports were mainly due to high demand for eco-friendly cars, including electric and hybrid vehicles, which made up almost 1/3 of the total auto exports. Eco-friendly cars saw a 47.8% on-year increase in terms of export value by reaching the $1.8 billion mark. Sales of environmentally friendly vehicles to the U.S. since the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act increased 153% on-year.
Also, the number of electric vehicles exported rose by over 61% compared to a year before. Domestic sales of eco-friendly vehicles also soared 11.9% on year, with hybrid cars seeing a 53% increase. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
With the drop in consumer sentiment and a weakened rebound effect from China, the OECD has lowered the global economic growth rate for 2024 from 2.9% in June's report to 2.7%. In its interim economic outlook report released on Tuesday, the OECD forecasted that growth projection is expected to remain low under tightening monetary policies to restrict inflation. However, the economic outlook for this year has projected optimism since June's report, as countries such as the U.S., Japan, and Brazil displayed stable growth throughout the first half of the year. A U.S. district court has dismissed a lawsuit filed by an American nuclear power company against Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power to block its exports of reactors, saying it lacked standing to sue. This could give the Korean company some leverage in negotiations. Yuen explains.
On Monday, the U.S. Federal District Court of Washington, D.C. dismissed Westinghouse's case filed against Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power over issues of intellectual property infringement. Westinghouse had filed complaints in a U.S. court in October last year against KHNP and its parent Korea Electric Power Corporation to block South Korea's exports of nuclear power reactors to Poland. The move came shortly after KHNP had inked a letter of intent with energy companies in Poland to build a nuclear power plant, which includes multiple 1.4 gigawatt capacity power units. Westinghouse argued that the Korean APR 1400 nuclear reactor model was based on its original design and technology, which requires agreement before any exports. Meanwhile, KHNP argued that while assistance was received in the early stages of development of the APR 1400, the core technology was domestically developed, making it free from U.S. export restrictions or any royalty payments. However, the Washington, D.C. Federal District Court dismissed the case over lack of standing to sue based on the Department of Energy's Rules and Regulations Part 810. The court stated that the authority to enforce the export restriction had been delegated exclusively to the U.S. Attorney General, and therefore a private entity that is not the U.S. government does not hold the legal authority to assert the rights. The core issue of intellectual property infringement has not been addressed, though, meaning this may not be the end to the dispute. Yuen, Arirang News.
President Yoon, while on a trip to New York, has approved a motion seeking the arrest of the opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung on corruption allegations. The motion was then sent to the National Assembly and is waiting to be put to a vote at the earliest plenary session. Our political correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
It did not take long for South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol to approve a motion requesting National Assembly consent to arrest the leader of the Democratic Party. Yoon apparently gave the go online while on a visit to the U.S. to attend the UN General Assembly. This is the second time the president has approved such a motion after one in February that was rejected by Parliament. Since the ruling People Power Party's floor leader Yoon Jae-myung plans to hold an assembly group speech on Wednesday, the motion will likely be reported there and then put to a vote in Thursday's plenary session at the earliest. Democratic Party spokesperson Kim Han-gyu told reporters on Tuesday that the party was in shock at the president's swift decision, given there are many pages in the document.
I want to express our surprise at how fast a consent to arrest motion can be processed. It couldn't have been easy to decide this fast, especially with the president abroad.
Kim added that DP's leadership plans to meet many groups of lawmakers starting on Tuesday to discuss what to do if a vote takes place on Thursday. The ruling People Power Party, however, stressed that the rival party must not provide bulletproof protection for Lee.
Many of the public will evaluate Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung's arrest issue from an objective and neutral point of view. I hope the Democratic Party faces the voting process with the public's cold gaze in mind.
Earlier, the opposition party submitted a motion requesting the dismissal of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo as part of a request for governmental reform. An unprecedented voting process that may hold the fate of the Prime Minister as well as the Democratic Party leader may take place. The voting can only proceed if a majority of lawmakers are present at the plenary session. And if the majority of those present votes in favor, the motion passes. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
The Speaker of South Korea's National Assembly, Kim Jin-pyo, on Tuesday met with his counterparts from 5 Central Asian countries and vowed to find new areas of cooperation to achieve mutual growth. Kim met in Seoul with parliamentary speakers from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Celebrating 31 years of diplomatic relations, the speakers signed a joint declaration promising cooperation, especially in digital infrastructure, as well as continued exchanges between the parliaments. They held special talks on ways to cooperate on the economy and digital switchover. Speaker Kim also called for support for South Korea's bid to host the World Expo 2030 in Busan. South Korea is going all out to support socio-economically vulnerable young people in the country by expanding its current measures and coming up with new types of assistance. The government and the ruling People Power Party announced on Tuesday that there will be more counseling available, mental health checkups, and one-on-one support from professionals. Funding will be provided too for people to use for personal growth. The help applies to the young who live in isolation, are in the low-income bracket, suffer from depression, and more. The aim is to see some change as early as next year.
Temperatures will take a steep dive starting tomorrow. Along with nationwide rain, highs will drop to 24 degrees Celsius, which is below the seasonal average. Readings will keep dropping until Thursday morning. If you take a look at the satellite imagery, rain clouds are slowly approaching South Korea. By tomorrow, the entire nation will see showers. Rain will be concentrated across the south of the country. Heavy downpours are expected for the coastlines of Gyeongsangnam-do Province, with up to 150 millimeters in the forecast. Jeollado Province and the surrounding regions will see up to 120. Chungcheongdo and Gyeongsangbuk-do Province can expect 30 to 80 millimeters. Relatively fewer showers are in the forecast for the Seoul metropolitan area, with only about 5 to 40. Central regions will see rainy spells for the morning hours. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daegu will be starting off at 21 degrees. Showers will spread nationwide by the daytime. Seoul will get up to 24 degrees, Chuncheon 23, Daegu and Gyeongju will be topping out at 25 degrees. Starting on Friday, wide temperature gaps of at least 10 degrees or more are expected. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.